freedom I will soar through the storm and evermore. I hear the thunder, feel the fire. My soul's alive, my heart's desire to fly, to dream, to rise and scream. I am free.
Greetings, Patriots. I'm Perry Green. Welcome to this God in America podcast. The Lion's Den in Yukon, Oklahoma invited Bob Donohoo to be one of the speakers at their last meeting. Bob is a member of the Oklahomans for Preserving the U.S. Constitution. As you may know, Oklahoma joined 18 other states to call for a convention of states to amend the U.S. Constitution. They want amendments for term limits for our federal legislators and a balanced federal budget, among other things. The Constitution does grant us the right to amend it either through Congress or a convention of states. Bob provides us with some meaningful details as to why we may not want to have a convention of states and open the Constitution to more than what is on the surface of the Convention of States agenda. When we consider our history and the lack of integrity among many of our current elected officials, Oklahomans may want to contact their state representatives and ask them to rescind our commitment. There was a technical issue at the beginning of the recording. We missed a few minutes, but I hope you get the gist of what Bob has to say. Thanks for being with us. Let's keep the light burning.
Differently than we do today. To them, federal meant the states have 100% of the sovereignty, and that head government, the central, had none. In a national government, they're thinking, they define these terms during a convention. In a national government, the state members, the member states, have 0% of the sovereignty, and the central government up top had none, or had it all, had 100%. When we first came together, the 13 colonies became 13 states in a whole bit, and were under our nation's first constitution. They truly were formed as a federal government. The states retained 100% of the sovereignty. So when they had their commissions and they came together in Philadelphia in 1787, they were to maintain a federal nature to the government. If they even proposed 1% of the state sovereignty to go to the central government, they were out of bounds. They'd be violating their instructions. Well, they got together. They looked at the New Jersey plan, as it was called. James Madison's notes is excellent on this. I encourage you to read. It's a mere 1,000 pages long. It's quite the book. And they proposed a New Jersey plan, which is federal in structure. And they didn't like it. The majority of the delegates simply didn't like it. They wanted to give some of their powers, the state powers, to the central government. But it would violate their instructions. So it was James Madison who gave them the way out. But before then, before we can get to that point, if you look at the paper here, the delegates even spoken about that, because they eventually did violate their instructions. And John Langsing, right here in the paper about a quarter of the way down, the power of the convention was restrained to amending of a federal nature. The acts of Congress, the tenor of the acts of the states, the commissions produced by the several deputations, all prove this. It was unnecessary and improper to go further, but they did. Understand, they did. And there's all kinds, there's quite a number of delegates that came out and they speak about how they violated their instructions. Now, well, they would need to go further, to consider another option. James Madison at that time stood up, knowing they were going to shut down the New Jersey option. He stood up and he actually gave the delegates their way out. That's what he did. He looked at them and said, look, my paraphrase, I realize we're all bound by our state instructions, our commissions. But what we can do is, instead of appealing to the authority of our state legislators, we can appeal to the authority of the people. And he based this on the Declaration of Independence. And it's actually in here. Let me find it. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of its ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to form a new government. Madison goes on to say a little later in the convention, the people were in fact the fountain of all power, and by resorting to them, all difficulties were gotten over. They could alter constitutions as they pleased. So understand what they did. Bound by their state legislators, where they got the authority to convene from to have this convention, they said, we're going to appeal to the people for our authority. Then they were at liberty to change, come out with a whole new document. At that moment, it became a constitutional convention. They went along with it. At this point, they entertained the Virginia plan. The Virginia plan is actually the basis for our current Constitution. And by the way, I'm glad they did what they did. They had the authority to appeal to the people. It was legal, moral and ethical. If you go to your boss and ask for permission to do something, he turns you down, but then you go to your boss's boss and he says, yes, do it. Your boss may not like you anymore, but you have permission in that company to do it, right? That's in essence what the delegates did. They went to their boss's boss, the people. We'll explain how they did that in a moment. Now, what do the courts have to say about this? The courts actually have a lot to say because there have been a number of conventions. Imagine as states come in, they have to have their own constitutional convention and bring in their own constitutions. There have been so many court cases on this. The whole idea of the delegate authority, they had there's a legal summary. It's near the bottom. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to jump in the middle. Speaking about delegates, it says, they derive their powers not from the legislature, but from the people. And hence, their powers may not in any respect be limited or restrained by the legislatures. Under this view, it, in other words, the convention, is a legislative body of higher order. You know, right now, our Oklahoma State legislature has actually passed resolutions restricting and binding the delegates to a convention. Should we have an Article 5 convention? It doesn't matter. It's null and void. Precedence is already set. That resolution is simply going to be ignored. The courts aren't going to hold it against anybody, and the delegates at a convention are going to be the first one to be informed about it. By the way, if I know this as an IT guy, because that's all I am, I build computer networks for a living. If I know this as an IT guy, do you think they can't figure this out? They're going to know in a New York second, and they're going to do what they please. Just as James Madison said, just as what happened at the last convention. When the 1787 delegates called upon a higher authority, the people abandoned their instructions given by the state legislators. The convention became a constitutional convention. Flip the page over, number 3. Can Congress legislate Article 5 more than just setting a state and location? Yes. Convention of States says that's all they can do is set a date and a location. Okay? The reality is, it's simply not true at all. The whole idea of Congress can call a convention, when 34 states apply, Congress calls a convention. Well, they try to say that it can be limited because of the ERA amendment. In that case, Dr. Ferris is a part of the Convention of States. He argued that case. See, what happened was the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, went out to be ratified. It had a 7-year sunset clause. Well, the 7 years was coming up. Congress, it wasn't looking good. So Congress tried to extend the sunset clause while the amendment was mid-flight. Hey, you play a game of poker, you get dealt a lousy hand, all you get is a pair of deuces, a pair of twos, right? All of a sudden you jump up and holler, deuce is wild. What's everybody else going to say to you? Ha, ha, ha. You can't change the rules now. The hand is already dealt, right? You see, that's what happened with that case. It was a softball case. I'm glad not Dr. Ferris took it on. But he goes on to say because of that, Congress, they got their hands slapped by the Supreme Court. They can't touch Article 5. No, they can't change an amendment mid-flight. That's all that case decided. And there was a deal with Idaho trying to rescind, and that was as well in there, another detail. What has the U.S. Supreme Court said? Down the middle of that page, about a third of the way down. As a rule, the Constitution speaks in general terms, leaving Congress to deal with subsidiary matters of detail, and as a public interest in changing conditions may require. Congress to deal with subsidiary details. And Article 5 is no exception to the rule. They specifically state that Article 5 is no exception to the rule. You know what Congress has done with this? About 40 years ago, the last time we were close to having a convention, they floated 41 bills. You know, the most common topic in those bills was the idea of voting privileges by state. How many votes per state? They said, or the most common answer, in those 41 bills is that we're going to base it on the Electoral College. Oklahoma would, not 7 delegates, Oklahoma would get 7 votes. California would get, anybody know? 54. Now, the Oklahoma legislature passed a resolution in 23 saying, hey, one state, one vote. Okay, so the Oklahoma delegation shows up and they say we have 1 vote. What's California going to say? You keep your 1 vote. We're good with that. We're going to hang on to our 54. See, Congress gets to set the vote count. The American Bar Association says 1 state, 1 vote. They say this today is undemocratic. A better representation is the Electoral College. And that is what Congress today has an appetite for. We'd be swamped with liberals, all right? We'd be swamped with liberals. Remember, the whole idea of 1 state, 1 vote, why is it attractive? Because in the middle of America, small states, a lot of Republican controlled, that appeals 1 state, 1 vote. And if 34 of them actually agree to the Convention of States model, it's 34 states that say one state, one vote. That's attractive till California shows up with 54 delegates. Anybody know which number is greater, 54 or 34? You see, that is Congress's jurisdiction. By the way, that's not me saying that. Who said that? Supreme Court. They've already ruled on it, okay? So when the Convention of States come up with one state, one vote, they actually did that in 1787. They relied on the historical precedents. Congress has no appetite for that today. All right, so 2 myths. States combine their delegates. No, they can't. Courts, they try to prosecute their delegates, court's gonna throw it out. Delegates go as free agents. As long as they appeal to the people, they can do that. Number 2, oh, by the way, the delegates appeal to people. I understand that. Number 2, Congress can legislate a convention. There's so much they can do. It's like a 45-page document of all the options. On one page, one small paragraph, it talks about the voting delegate apportionment. The rest of the document talks about everything else they can do. Putting the idea of picking a city and state where the sheriff and the police and all, they won't honor arrest warrants. Should a state want to recall their delegate, they would have to issue an arrest warrant to get a delegate, an uncompliant delegate to leave. If Congress picks a city and state that won't go along with that, guess what? The delegate stays. I mean, there's a lot of techniques in there. Okay, let's move on. I've only got 4 minutes. Can a convention today ignore the 75% ratification requirement and actually devise a whole new means? 3/4 of the states, that's what's in our current Constitution. Understand that. Last time we had a convention, 1787, we already were under a constitution at the time. It's called the Articles of Confederation. 13 states in our union, right? In the nation at that point. All 13 states had to approve whatever came out of the convention. That was a requirement. And it was the state legislators that had to approve. That was a requirement. At the convention, they knew that would never fly. Rhode Island wasn't even there. They didn't even have delegates there. So you know what they did? They proposed a whole new means of ratification. It's actually in our new Constitution, our current one. And he said, 13, let's make it 9. They changed it. State legislators? Nah, they're not going to give up any of that sovereign power they have. We have to go to the people. So they said, let's have state ratification conventions. It was still within each state, they would do something like, just as an example, hypothetical, let's say you had 3 or 4 people from each county go to this convention, and now it's supposed to represent the people. They had like 400 or so people at each of these ratification conventions, in each one of the separate states. And when the first 9 came along and said, we're good with this, the other 4 were on their own. Those 9 formed a new nation. Now, what are the other 4 going to do? They all eventually joined. Rhode Island did too. The reluctant one, Rogue Island as it was called. I still like that name. Yeah, Rogue Island. They joined the Union 14 months after George Washington was sworn in as president. Now, the Convention of States, they can't accept that because think of the implications today. Can you imagine today a convention coming along and saying, yeah, we have a new document or serious amendments to the old one, and we're changing the ratification requirements. We want to have a national vote. We're a democracy now, national vote. Winner takes all. See, in America today, that just might sell because how many people think we're a democracy when we're not? Few people understand the distinction between what a republic is and what a democracy. And that's a high risk. And if a convention comes out and they propose that, who's going to have the wherewithal to stand up and say, no, you can't do that? Okay. That would take a massive pushback, just that idea. And yet they could do that. Last time, they changed the method of ratification. Now, a convention of states says, well, they fulfilled the old obligation when the 13 states, when they agreed to host a convention, a state convention, ratification convention, and they assented to that. That meant they fulfilled the 13 state legislative requirement, the Articles of Confederation. The thing is, that concept is nowhere to be found in the thinking of the Founding Fathers. I've read a bunch of their works. I've read as much as I have, right? That thinking was nowhere to be found. If those last 4 states never even initiated the process, the first 9 still would have formed a new nation. Convention of States, they just made that up whole cloth because they wanted to make it look like the process was satisfied. No, it wasn't. Now, how do they justify it? They appealed to the people. They had, in their case, allow me a minute, they had state ratification conventions. You can't bind your delegates regardless of what state legislator says. Courts won't hold it up, okay? You can't, number 2, right, going on, the Congress can do far more than setting a date and location. They can set the delegate count. The convention of states, one state, one vote, utter myth. It's an utter myth in today's environment. They can change the method of ratification. As soon as they come along and appeal to a higher authority, the people, they can actually change that, just like they did last time. Remember, everything I'm laying out here is what they did in 1787 that gave us our current Constitution. Our current Constitution hit a sweet spot. I love this document. I'm here to defend it. I can't imagine what America would come out with today that would actually be any kind of improvement. Okay, I ask you to do something. Please stand behind your state legislatures as they vote on this matter this coming session. All right, it came up last year in the House. It's going to come up again this year. And I'm looking at finding an author on the Senate side to rescind Oklahoma's applications for a convention. Oklahoma's already applied. The research I've given you now is all new. It's rather new from recent research, okay, by the John Birch Society. It's all valid. Please back it up, back up your legislators as they make this vote. Thank you very much for your time.
You got 10 minutes for
Q&A. Thank you for the clock. You have any questions? Yes, ma'am. I'm really speaking for myself. No. No, understand, there's a few of us that got together and we have created an organization, Oklahoma's for Preserving the U.S. Constitution. But frankly, it's a few friends, and we do go out and visit our legislators. We're using the material of the John Birch Society, okay? But in our group, we're not even all members of the John Birch Society going around the hallways and visiting the legislators. So there's nothing in any national providence. What we're counting on is the content to impact people. Does that make sense? Be anybody's hero. We're standing on principle and the content that we're presenting. I hope that makes sense. Oh, by the way, I'm not a paid lobbyist. In order to cover my expenses, I robbed my wife's essential oils budget, okay? I hope you understand. That's where I get the money from. Thank you for dinner tonight. Next question. Okay, now I see heads nodding. Yes, ma'am. Not necessarily. You see, last time they were supposed to have all 13 states. A nation was founded, 13 states. They changed that and they got away with it. That's the key thing. They got away with it. You ought to read the minutes of the last convention in 1787. They were trying to figure out how to manipulate the American people. One of the delegates even stood up and said, you know, we got to get this approved fast and catch them by surprise, because if they think about it, they're not going to like it. They actually said that, and it's actually recorded in the minutes. So they intentionally try to figure out how to get it past people. Now, would a convention do that today, or are we a little bit more holy than our founding fathers? I got a book for you to read, 1,000 pages long. Any other questions? Excuse me? Oh, James Madison's notes of the 1787 convention. It's actually a fast read. It's more in the form of minutes, but it is well documented. And you can see the tenor and nature of the conversation and how it flowed. They talked about violating the Articles of Confederation. Violate is their word. All right, understand, that's not my word. That is their word, okay? You know, so today would be like saying, okay, we're going to violate the U.S. Constitution. That'd be an equivalent. They got away with it, folks. Now, do we need to balance our federal budget? Yes. Do we need to expose our entire Constitution and all its risks that the courts and Supreme Court continue to back up? No. Please be with me on that. Please, no. Senator Stewart, Representative Kelly, do you gentlemen have any questions on this? I see you patiently nodding your head, you know, and all right. Did you have this piece of paper? It's at the bottom of it, but I'll give you my card. Okay, that'll work. Sir, anytime I'll buy you lunch and sit down and answer any questions you want, okay? Really, anything. All right, yeah, trust me, not tomorrow. The state committee meets and votes on a resolution floated by Rogers County, their committee, and it passed unanimously asking Oklahoma legislators to support a resolution to rescind Oklahoma's applications. Our state legislator has to do that, all right? And that it's making remarkable progress in the House this last year. Okay, legislators, we visit our representatives. It was very well received across the board, okay? Of course, there's always a few, right, who are gonna hold out and differ, and they're willing to take the risks. That's what it boils down to. All right, they say our nation in desperate straits. They're willing to gamble with our Constitution. I simply differ with them on my opinion, all right? Fortunately, there's 101 representatives, right? This coming year, yeah, I'd like to focus in the Senate. I know we haven't met, sir, but I would like to focus in the Senate, have our team visit our state senators. Monday, lunch, if you're open. All right, I'm making the appointment in public. You notice how I do that? Y'all understand? You get it, right? And sir, I'll buy your lunch. You know where the money comes from. Y'all know where the money comes from? I'm glad you asked. Okay, I'm glad you asked. I got to answer that one last question. Okay, Convention of States will tell you we're 19 states, okay? The reality is we're a lot closer than you might think. There is one congressman who's already authored a resolution in Congress saying we have 42 states to qualify. And he does his own math on figuring out who these 42 states are. You see, they've got hundreds of applications over time. So he does his own math and figured out, well, we can strip the subject out of this bill because it's so old and it'll be plenary. All right, that's actually their term. And he's done his own math and says, we're 42, let's call for a convention. Congress has yet to take up on it. Other states have actually looked at that and they've rescinded all their applications. Okay, none of the COS states have, they're still at 19. But we are actually that close. And who gets to decide when to call a convention? The private organization, Convention of States, or Congress? We need to send a message. If Oklahoma rescinds its applications in the middle of red country, Oklahoma rescinds, it'll send a message and the rest of our republic will see it. That's the power of Oklahoma. That's why I'm devoting so much time. Folks, we lose our Constitution. We'll never see it again from millennia. It is that rare a document. Yes, but we need to follow it. We don't need to amend it. If we were to follow it, we wouldn't have a budget problem. I agree, it's hanging on by a thread. But what we need to do is follow it. It's still there. Our founders fought a war to get that document in place. Do you want to ask your children to fight another war to get it back in place? No. I don't want to hand my kids a ballot box, not a cartridge box. Now, I know I'm moving into dance time. They're talking about cartridge boxes.
My soul's alive, my heart's desire to fly, to dream, to rise and scream.